Hello, and welcome to Doctor Who, the Hartnell years, a celebration of the era of Doctor Who that started what was to become an internationally popular series and very much a part of British folklore. This is a nostalgic look at some of the early years of Doctor Who before decimalisation, wheel clamps, colour TV and ghetto blasters. The BBC Film and Videotape Library at Brentford, a few miles from here, houses many hundreds of thousands of programmes. And during the 70s, a mass sort-out took place to make room for other recordings. Some early Doctor Who episodes were retained, however, as examples of different types of stories, but sadly, some were destroyed. By the 70s, the sales potential had been fully exploited commercially, and there were various problems with regard to contract negotiations for transmission of vintage material. This is not now the case. And so we decided to share with you some of the Hartnell material which hasn't been shown since its original transmission. But first things first. William Hartnell was born on the 8th of January 1908. His first stage appearance was in 1924, and he first entered films in 1931. He also made innumerable TV appearances, including The Army Game, Crimes of Passion, and of course, Doctor Who. I'm here at the BBC Enterprises exhibition store in West London. Now, as you can see, I'm surrounded by costumes, monsters, special props, scripts, and good gracious, a ghetto blaster. This one was used by my companion Ace in a story called Remembrance of the Daleks. Now this is an Aladdin's cave of memorabilia stretching back nearly 30 years. William Hartnell, or Billy as he was known to his friends, created the role of Doctor Who. And the Doctor's first appearance on British TV took place on the 23rd of November 1963, the day after President Kennedy's assassination. 2 months earlier, on September the 27th, a trial run was given to the first episode. It was never transmitted. Let's take a look at what was really the first episode of Doctor Who. I'm sure you'll agree, an example of first-class science fiction. Seriously, though, still compelling, even today. When the actual first episode was recorded 3 weeks later, several changes to the programme were made. You may have noticed that Susan said she was born in the 49th century in the pilot, but here's what was said in the reshoot. Another very important change that was made was the actual TARDIS noise, which, fascinatingly enough, has always been classified as music. Perhaps the classifier was a bagpipe player. Here's how the nation first heard the noise that was to become so famous. As time went by, it was decided that the noise would not be heard inside the TARDIS, only outside, in order to facilitate dialogue taking place while the ship arrived or departed. The second section of the pilot was recorded twice. This is the sequence that begins with Barbara entering the TARDIS interior. The main problem with take one was the TARDIS doors, which got stuck, and willing scene hands made an enormous racket trying to get them closed. You'll doubtless have noticed, too, that William Hartnell's initial portrayal of the Doctor was very much the anti-hero, a rather unpleasant, selfish old man. This portrayal was to soften as he settled into the role. Interestingly enough, I found my performance changed and developed as I got to grips with the best role in British television. And now, the only remaining episode from 1965's four-part story, The Crusade. The scene is 12th century Palestine. The Doctor's granddaughter, Susan, has left the TARDIS crew, and Vicky, played by Maureen O'Brien, has joined Ian, Barbara and the Doctor and is masquerading as a boy. Note the much gentler performance by William Hartnell as Richard the Lionheart attempts to engineer peace with the Saracens in episode 3 of The Wheel of Fortune. Well, of course, Barbara wasn't executed in the final episode, and the Doctor and Vicky escaped by the skin of their teeth from being burned at the stake as sorcerers. The Crusade was written by Doctor Who's first script editor, David Whittaker, and is a good example of the purely historical stories which were entertaining, educational, and highly popular at the time. Now, it's easy to think that Doctor Who has reached international appeal more recently, but in fact, in the 1960s, foreign sales of Doctor Who were really quite healthy. And here from the archive is an example of one of the episodes specially dubbed into Arabic. I couldn't have put it better myself. And now, an example of one of William Hartnell's latest adventures coming up. It's the final episode of a 4-part story by Brian Hales called The Celestial Toymaker. Now, once again, this is the only remaining episode of this story regarded by many as a classic adventure. It was originally transmitted in April 1966 and concerns the TARDIS crew's survival in the domain of the Toymaker, who dominates an evil fantasy world. Michael Gough, as always, is superb as a Toymaker, and by this time, all the Doctor's original companions have departed. Now, on board with the Doctor now are Stephen Taylor, played by Peter Purvis, and Dodo Chaplet, played by Jackie Lane. Many of the trilogic game sequences involved the use of a double for the Doctor's hands in order to lighten William Hartnell's workload in The Final Test. Marvellous stuff. And a fine example of linking from one story to another, the next story being The Gunfighters, where the Doctor seeks help for his toothache. No, he hadn't been poisoned. After Celestial Toymaker, William Hartnell was to play the role in 5 more stories before relinquishing the part in late October 1966. If it hadn't been for William Hartnell's marvellous portrayal, the part wouldn't have been around and I wouldn't have been lucky enough to have got it in early 1987. Where also I was lucky enough to meet Lady Painforth. I have that effect on all women. The late William Hartnell was a hard act to follow. And the mantle of responsibility fell on Patrick Troughton. But that's another story.